I'm Steve Atkins from Scottish and Southern Electricity Networks, and I'm chair of DSO Transition, which is workstream 3 of the Open Networks. And my role really is just to give you a little bit of content and an introduction, and then I'm going to hand over to Rafik and Angeliki from DMVGL, who've been working with us on this to run through the methodology for the implementation plan and walk through the model. For those of you that don't know, the ENA's Open Networks project's a major industry initiative that's around enabling homes, businesses and communities to provide clean energy in support of net zero back to networks, about delivering a smart grid by opening up new markets and building an inclusive energy system. And we're hoping to help customers connect and break down barriers, enable them to access multiple markets to provide services, at the same time reducing costs for consumers through more cost-effective planning. And the project's a key initiative to deliver government policy as set out in the Ofgem and BEIS Smart Systems and Flexibility Plan, the government's industrial strategy and the Clean Growth Plan. And we're very much doing taking a learning by doing approach. So we're utilising innovation funding to trial and test aspects of the various future electricity system options. And if you're interested in more, you can find a short animation on the project at the link on that slide. If we move to the next slide, Dan. So in terms of the DSO implementation plan, this really is a key project deliverable for workstream 3 this year. And it's all around setting out a clear pathway to the implementation of distribution system operation and a key input to RIIO-2 business planning process. And it's very much around the network's role in providing distribution system operation. So there's elements of distribution system operation that networks will provide, and this implementation plan provides a consolidated view of the outcomes from open network and industry to progress the transition from distribution network operators to entities that kind of support the rollout of distribution system operation, and provides greater visibility of that implementation progress, which we know is really important to stakeholders. And the implementation plan provides insights into actions implemented to date, as well as anticipated windows for future implementation, and serves as a tool to report progress and identify any barriers and gaps in delivering DSO functionality. So what you view today represents a snapshot in time as in June 2020 when we collated this, but with a plan to update in Q1 2020 and thereafter update on a regular 6-monthly basis, so you can see progress. And when you come back to this slide pack, if you're looking at it afterwards, on the right hand side you can see the outputs, and all of those are links that will take you direct to those outputs. So DMVGL are going to be going through the interactive roadmap and outlining the report and appendices. And there's also a demonstration video if memory fails you after this presentation and you need another refresh. If we move to the next. And just to give you a recap of Open Networks' work on distribution system operation that's kind of culminated in this implementation plan. So beginning way back in 2017, Open Networks worked to define what distribution system operation is and the functions and activities that are particularly associated with networks that will be undertaken under that. And you can see the 8 functions that we put to stakeholders and got stakeholder feedback on, and they were this kind of seen as the key functions that distribution network operators would undertake in support of distribution system operation. And then our initial work focused on defining the best and most efficient routes to transition to this world of distribution system operation. We utilized smart grid architecture model that you can see at the top of the page there, and started to model future world. So how we would best organize networks and markets in order to deliver the benefits of a smart grid. And we defined those future worlds accordingly. And then in 2019, we undertook an independent impact assessment to look at the various options needed to make DSO a reality. And we compared the strengths and weaknesses of those different future worlds against over 30 criteria, including decarbonisation and cost to the consumer. And the conclusions of that impact assessment sort of pointed that we were already kind of in a world B, and that was kind of a least regret position of joint coordination between ESO and the DNOs, and that would kind of probably progress for some time before maybe decisions were made for towards other paths. And with all of that work, a full sort of consultation engagement process were held for both the Future Worlds and Future Worlds impact assessment work, which is still available on our website. And I know, looking at the attendee list today, many of you were instrumental in being part of that and adding your voice. And the next step identified for ourselves from this is, we'll continue our work on defining the kind of least regrets steps to ensure enhanced coordination between the DSO and the ESO. And part of that is looking at today's DSO implementation plan, monitoring and providing visibility of actions required to deliver the least regrets pathway, both in the short, the medium, and the long term. So at this point, the next slide just summarizes exactly what I've just said. So at this point, I'm going to hand over to Rafiq from DMVGL, who were commissioned to help us produce the implementation plan. And he's going to go through some objectives and methodology before Angeliki takes us through a demonstration. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you, Steve. Good afternoon, everybody. So my name is Rafiq Gesmissen. I'm a director with DMVGL in the energy markets and technology team. And myself and my colleague Angeliki Goga and our team have been supporting, as Steve says, the ENA in developing sort of the roadmap since January of this year. Daniel, if you want to do the next slide. For those of you who are maybe not so familiar with DMVGL, we're a global verification and certification society, have existed for around 150 years since the mid-19th century, originating in the maritime industry and providing assurance on sort of maritime infrastructure and vessels. And in the last sort of 90 years or so, have transitioned or evolved also in providing the same kind of services, business assurance and energy advisory services in the energy sector across the entire value chain. And as part of our DNA as a company is a focus on making our world safer, smarter and greener. And so as an organization, we're very involved in invested in the development of renewables, in the decarbonization and the transition to net zero, and as part of that, in line with that DNA and that philosophy for our company, we've been very proud to work with the ENA in developing the DSO roadmap, which we believe distribution system operation is a critical sort of component sort of in our transition to net zero. If we can go to the next slide. there's a few more details. Just a bit, some recap of what Steve has said. So, you know, if I were to place sort of a headline objective of the roadmap, it's to provide insight into how our networks deliver distribution system operation. As Steve has explained, the starting point for it is the 8 DSO functions previously defined by the ENA OMP project, and they cover both sort of elements of distribution system operation functionality and capability that cater to sort of the optimization of processes and between the networks, so between all of the distribution operators, the transmission owners, and the electricity system operator, as well as enabling flexibility and enabling sort of capability for other energy energy industry stakeholders, such as sort of supply companies, wholesalers, flexibility providers or aggregators and other stakeholders, in terms of enabling and optimizing the services that they will be able to provide in a smart and flexible sort of energy system. Okay, so as Steve has said, we've been commissioned to deliver this work. There are two key outputs to sort of our engagement. The first is this interactive online roadmap, which hopefully you've all had a chance to access and sort of to look at online, and the link has been available to you. And you may have noticed that alongside sort of that online roadmap is a detailed DSO Implementation Plan document that provides in document form sort of the details, the full details on activities and steps underneath these functions for your reference. Okay, so in the next slide, a bit of you know, just an insight into the development process. So I'll start on the right-hand side. So the roadmap sort of allows you to drill down into sort of a fair amount of detail, I would say, starting with the 8 DSO functions, which each break down in the number of activities, for each of which you can get to the roadmap and in the document, you know, the full details, the description, you know, what does an activity do, what is it meant to achieve, what is the timeline that it's meant to be or targeted to be delivered by, and what does it involve, and yeah, depending on your background as an industry stakeholder, you'll be able to derive you know, the important parts for you as an individual or as a business, or as a stakeholder. And then underneath the activities, we drill down further into very granular steps, which sort of constitute concrete elements, concrete capability that needs to be developed, delivered, implemented, refined, and made available, again, for the networks themselves, but also for the benefit of all other stakeholders. So what's gone into this roadmap on the left side? So indeed, previously, the first and foremost, lots of the great body of work developed under the ENA Open Networks project and specifically Workstream 3 that Steve has already described. We've incorporated on the transmission side, where business plans, initial business plans were already available, information from those business plans, which provide sort of evidence and a direction of travel at transmission level for DSO development. We've considered off-jam and base work programs and consultations, such as, for instance, the targeted charging review process undertaken by off-jam currently. We've also factored in sort of relevant development taking place as part of innovation projects, and specifically sort of the 3 network innovation competition projects known as TEF, that's Transition, EFFS, and Fusion, 3 sort of headline innovation projects that all look at various aspects of flexibility mechanisms and commercial markets for flexibility to be developed and refined over the next few years. And finally, so with all of those inputs, you know, over the past 6 months or so, we've worked very closely with ENA OMP Workstream 3 stakeholders, So 6 DNOs, 3 TOs, an ESO, the innovation owners with Ofgem and BASE to refine, discuss, and optimize sort of the description, the scope, and the proposed timing for these activities. And all of that you'll see sort of reflected sort of in the roadmap. Now, in terms of the roadmap's actual design, there's a couple of principles or components sort of that I would highlight. So firstly, as you can imagine, there's a lot of stakeholders involved. And so in order to make this presentable and accessible to you as stakeholders, we've aggregated in various ways sort of the way we capture companies' activities against delivering steps. So for instance, if you were to access a step under an activity that sits with the networks, in some cases this will reflect an aggregated timeline across, for instance, the 6 DNOs delivering the same piece of capability in broadly the same timeline. Now, for some steps that are directly related to previous ENA OMP products and flexibility commitments and other standards, you'll be able through the roadmap to access a further level of detail that allows you to observe sort of the current status as at the time of the information going into the roadmap for each of the network companies, and we'll demonstrate this to you shortly. In terms of the information, you can see we have, in terms of an analysis, we've employed certain minimums of commonality and relevance requirement for information going into the roadmap, which means that sort of for those steps that we have indeed captured and aggregated, they were considered to be of a common relevance. The roadmap also reflects, in a more generic way, other activities undertaken by individual network companies that may have been only relevant to that specific network operator or company, in a more generic way to show that there is a time against a further activity informing, a further step informing an activity which informs or determines the timeline to complete. Again, we will demonstrate this to you. Above that, on top of that, I would say, the roadmap allows you insight into the specific different types of steps sort of underneath an activity. So as I've alluded to, so there are steps that you would describe as network activities, so networks implementing or refining certain capability. There are development and definition steps. So for instance, reflecting the outcomes of ENA OMP work that inform the subsequent network activity. There are steps associated with the innovation projects, and we have steps associated with key processes, for instance, with Ofgem, as well as where relevant, we've identified steps that reflect necessary code changes, necessary changes in industry codes to enable or validate formally the capability to be deployed in the future. And finally, so the roadmap gives you all some insight into the potential complexity of the capability or functionality being created, to give you an idea of what informs sort of the timeline sort of to deliver this. And again, we enable you to keep track of progress against any of the steps, which includes that the roadmap is anticipated to be updated every 6 months, and the next time would be in Q1 2021. That's the next slide. So I've said alongside so the online roadmap is the DSO Implementation Plan as a reference document. I should explain a little bit about sort of the structure of this document. So you'll find the main document accompanied by 8 appendices, 1 appendix for each of the DSO function, providing you the full detail of that function, the underlying activities and the underlying steps, and some further information around potential barriers, enablers, and other considerations for network companies in delivering these steps that for reasons of space might have been captured very briefly only in the online roadmap tool. But so this is a reference document available for your consultation. The main body of the document provides, again, an overview of the development process and the principles, and a sort of a higher level description across each of the functions to provide insight into sort of the scope and purpose of each function and what it's meant to cover. This document is meant to be static, as it will not normally be updated sort of in great detail going forward. So it's something that you can always consult, and it will always be accurate in terms of what the roadmap says and does. The appendices, they are anticipated to be updated alongside the roadmap tool. And so there you can continue to consult relevant and the latest information against specific activities and steps. So I think that's what I would cover, and I believe we have a QA at this stage. Is that correct? Yes. So Daniel, if you want to, we may have written questions, I think.
I can't see any that have come in at the moment. We can give it a few minutes before we go on to the live demonstration if anyone has any questions they want to ask. Can't see any that have come in, so should we move on to the demonstration if I just pass over to Angeliki quickly?
Hi everyone, this is Angeliki Goga from DNPGL. I should share now my desktop. So today we're going to have also this live demonstration of the roadmap. I think you're all familiar with the landing page at the DNA's website, and then at the bottom of the page, we have the roadmap. So we recommend that you view the roadmap on a desktop browser and also with full screen, because that's the best experience that you will get, and you will be able to see all the details and all the information that we have. So to view in the full view, you need to click on that button at the bottom of the page, and that brings you to the full roadmap view and the about page. So first, to start with this navigation bar at the bottom of at the top of the page. Sorry, okay, I just had some issues with my sharing. So here there is this navigation bar. If you click on these boxes, you can move to the different sections of the roadmap. And then this about section gives you some more information about the purpose of the roadmap and how to use it, and some extra information about definitions that we have used within the roadmap. Now, if we click on the roadmap view, this is where we can see the timeline of each of the 8 DSO functions. And you have also the option to select here the time frame, which can be short term, medium term, or long term. And I will say a little bit more about the time frame in a couple of minutes. So in this view, you can also see 2 lines. There is this gray line here that always shows the current date. So now we are in July 2020. And then there is also this blue dotted line here, which shows the start of Rio ED2 period. Now, if we click on the bar of one function, we can see more information about this function. So first we provide the purpose of the function, which is a purpose as has been defined by Open Networks project. Then we saw the implementation period of the function, and then the number of steps and the contribution by participating organizations towards the completion of this function. In that case, we have 75 steps, and then we had 177 contributions by participating organizations, which we then aggregated to 75 steps where this was possible. We also provide some more information about the progress by contributor organizations. And then you can also see information about the perceived complexity of the function. So the perceived complexity is based on the complexity of each step that is part of this function. And we can also then move to the function view. And this is where you can see similar type of information, but for every activity which sits under a function. So the first thing to do here is to select the function that you want to view, and you can do it by this by clicking this drop-down box at the top right of your page. And similarly here, you can select your time frame. Now, if you click on the bar of the activity, you get similar information which we have already discussed in the roadmap view. So I will not dwell more on this view. Let's go into the activity, which is also the one that has more information and more details for you to look into all the steps that are part of the DSO implementation plan. So now we are in function 1 and activity A. The first thing to do here is always select your function and then the activity. We are now in function 1. If I click on function 2 and I don't select an activity, then I don't see anything. So you always need to select the right activity. So now I select an activity which is under function 2, and you can see the information here. Let's go back to function 1 now and activity A. Another thing you will notice here, which is different from the previous views, is that we have bars with different colors. So different colors reflect different step types. Rafik already mentioned some of the steps that we have, the type of steps that we have, which is the code change process, a development activity, an enabler or a network action. So these are all here. And yes, and then you can see the information here. I think this activity it doesn't have one type of step, so I will go into that in a couple of minutes. So I think this is also a good point to explain what the time frame means for our roadmap. So the short-term time frame always shows information from the last 2 months, which means now May 2020, to 2 years ahead. If we now select medium-term time frame, this will display the time frame from the last year, as we can see here, until 5 years ahead. And then the long-term view displays all the steps, activities, functions from 2020, January 2020 actually, until the end of the last reported step. There is also one more thing that I would like to mention here. So yes, in some cases, the one step might start after the end date of the selected time frame view, or in some cases, the implementation dates are not known yet. So in these cases, the step is displayed as a narrow band at the end of the view. For example, here we have this step, which we don't have the implementation dates yet, and we show it at the end of the view of the medium-term time frame. Also, in this activity, we do have these steps from individual organizations which are related to this activity. It's what Rafik mentioned earlier, that at some point, if one step is only relevant for one company, we include it in the roadmap, but we don't show the details. So this is how we will show steps like that. So we aggregate them under this one category. And in that case, we have steps from 2 DNOs. One other thing that you will see in our roadmap, again, that's related to the time frame, is that a step might have been completed before the start of our view. In that case, we saw the step at the start of the roadmap, again as a narrow band. So for example, if I click on this step here, skipped a moment, yes, we see that this step has been completed since March 2019, which is well ahead before May 2020, and so we show it as a narrow band at the start of the roadmap. And another thing I'd like to mention for you and for navigating across the roadmap is that in most cases, the sequence of the steps reflects also some interdependency between the steps. So we have this example here with step 9, which is a development activity by ENA ONP about the development of the system-wide resource register. Steps 10 and 11 are reflecting the phase 1 and phase 2 of the implementation of the system-wide resource register by the DNOs. And then step 12 is related to a code modification which is associated to the system-wide resource register. So we have all these 4 steps together, and that's easier also for you to navigate, and you see the interdependency between the steps. Now, if we click on the bar of a step, we start getting more information about this step. First, we see the function and the activity, and then the description of the step, as this has been defined and agreed for the purpose of the DSO roadmap. We also include information about the implementation period, when a step started and when will be completed, based on the responses of the associated organizations. And then we also hear the organizations which are involved. So in that case, we have 6 DNOs, and then we can see also the progress of the DNOs against this step. So we have 2 DNOs who are not currently planning to implement the step, 1 DNO who has completed the step, 3 DNOs who have completed the step, excuse me, and then 1 DNO who has just started the step. You can also see information about the perceived complexity of the step. And then at the bottom of this pop-up window, we include a link to an associated document. So if I click the link here, that brings me to a document which is related to this step, and then you can see more information, how this step has been developed and why it is relevant for the DSO implementation map. So if I click the link, then I go back to the ENA's website. So I will click again the full screen. There is one more functionality that we have enabled for you in this roadmap, and this gives you the opportunity to see further details about specific organizations for specific steps. So for the steps that have this green dot here, this is the M column, which identifies steps that have been identified for implementation within the Open Networks project, and then they contain granular data on implementation and progress by network companies, so you can see further information. And then if I click on this green dot here, I get a table at the bottom of the page where we can see all the 6 DNOs. We have the progress against the step. In this case, this step has been completed, and then the completion date. If we have more information and comments by DNOs, will be displayed here in this field. And then in some cases, you might also see some links which will lead you to the associated web page. So in that case, that brings us back to ENW's website about flexibility services. And I think that this brings us to the end of the navigation of the DSO roadmap.
Great, thanks, Angeliki.
So I'll stop sharing now. Yep.
Sure, I'll head back to the presentation. We've just got another pause for Q&A if anyone has any questions. They could pop them in the chat box. We'll leave it a few minutes just in case anyone's typing. got a question in from Mike K. Guys, if anyone wants to take that one.
Yeah, so we mentioned in the roadmap that we saw the completion date of a function. So completion of a function, usually it's there to reflect, it's an indication actually of the progress of the function based on reported progress of the associated steps. So this is really if the steps are close to completion and implementation, this is how you will see also the progress of the function. So yes, I can say that I think it is more related to the full implementation of the steps rather than that the function will be complete, because the function is supposed to be then operating under business as usual DSO world.
Can I add to that, Angelique?
Yep.
Yeah, Mike, the as you look at the actual table, there's classification around where those steps are at. So our networks are in the process of planning them, implementing them, integrating them into the business, so they're fully operational. So for each of those, you do have to have a look at that activity and look at the classification. So there might be something that we're doing at the moment and we've completed that, but it's really because of questions of scale, it's a fairly simplistic function, but the next step, as we update each 6 months, we'll be adding to that and adding information to that. So the next step may be to say, well, actually, we now need to scale that up to be fully operational and integrated into the business. I mean, as you probably see, there's a wealth of information there that took an awful long time to compile. So most networks kind of focused on where those activities were at that time. If we'd have kind of added in the full implementation plan right the way through to full scale functionality, that have been kind of way more lines there, probably a bit unwieldy. But I think the principle is getting this information out there, making data open and available, helps us then kind of challenge it and say, right, okay, what else do we need to enhance it? I see there's another question there around any way to keep the boxes open from Helen. As soon as you move away from the bar, they close, and that makes it difficult to work with, especially if you want to have another document open at the same time.
Yeah, so that's part of the functionality of the tool. And as we saw, you need to click on the bar to have the pop-up window open. And it depends on the browser. So on the browser that I use, right click on the bar keeps the pop-up window open. But then if you move the arrow and your mouse, it closes. So yeah, that's how it works at the moment.
Just to add to that.
Yep.
So in case that doesn't quite work if you're multitasking, so that's part of the reason why there are the documents alongside it. So if it's easier, you can just download the PDF for that relevant function, and then you'll have the information in report form. If that helps.
Yes, so to add on that, as Rafik said, in the appendices, you will see the same information and even more enhanced for each step. So if you want even more details, this is where you can find it.
Great, thanks guys. I can't see any more questions, so we'll just go on to the final slide to wrap up. A further stakeholder forum is being planned at the end of September, and details will follow. This is just to sort of get a bit more feedback from you guys on how you've been using the tool and how relevant you found it, and any kind of other feedback. To be kept informed of the next event or any others that are run by Open Networks, please sign up to our mailing list. There's a link in the slides there, and it's also on all the web pages on our website. And as ever, to find out more or to send us feedback, please do email us at the address there. So thanks to the presenters for presenting today, and thanks to everyone for joining. And we'll go ahead there and finish it off and give everyone 15 minutes back. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.